Is there a blueprint for the death of an empire? A sequence of fatal mistakes that, as if following a script, every great power repeats before its fall. Over the last 500 years, three global empires have stood at the pinnacle of the world. Spain, with the gold of an entire continent. Britain, on which the sun never set. The Soviet Union, whose power held half the world in fear. They all collapsed, and they all followed the same devastating path. The most alarming part? Today, the United States is walking through the very same stages, not approaching them, but deep inside the process. This is the story of how empires really die, and why the mathematics of history suggest America is next. Before we examine the pattern, it's crucial to understand what imperial collapse looks like in reality. It doesn't start with a military defeat. It starts with economic exhaustion. The empire expands beyond its ability to sustain itself. Military bases in hundreds of countries, wars on multiple fronts, debts that can never be repaid. At first, the decline is invisible, but beneath the surface, the foundation is cracking. Resources are misallocated, productive capacity shrinks, and the best minds leave. Then, the fall accelerates. The currency everyone once desired floods back home, causing inflation. The vast military becomes an unbearable burden, and the promises once guaranteed by strength become empty words. This is exactly what happened to Spain, Britain, and the USSR. Let's see how. In the 16th century, Spain was the world's first superpower. By conquering the Aztecs and Incas, it gained control of unimaginable gold and silver reserves. Spanish silver became the global reserve currency, and this is where our pattern begins. The first step down this fatal path was military overextension. Spain fought wars everywhere, simultaneously. In the Mediterranean, across Europe, in the Americas, and in Asia. And the costs were staggering. To cover them, the Crown initiated the second stage of the script, currency debasement. They started mixing copper into silver coins until they were nearly worthless, triggering explosive inflation. This, in turn, led to the third stage, the debt spiral. Spain borrowed constantly and declared bankruptcy 4 times in just 40 years. But the fatal blow was the fourth stage, the loss of production. With unlimited money, Spain stopped making things. Why, when you could just buy them? Gold and silver flowed through Spain, not to it. When the silver supply dwindled, the system collapsed. The final act was social decay. With a dying economy, crime soared, and the most productive citizens emigrated. In a single century, Spain went from a global superpower to a second-rate power. Fast forward 300 years. At the start of the 20th century, the British Empire ruled a quarter of the globe. The pound sterling was the global reserve currency. But the pattern was already in motion. 2 world wars served as Britain's death sentence. It won, but at the cost of bankruptcy, entering a classic debt spiral. To finance the wars, Britain went deep into debt to the US, transforming from the world's creditor into its debtor. Its currency, the pound, was devalued. In 1947, Britain was forced to give up India. Over the next 20 years, it lost every other colony. The empire on which the sun never set ceased to exist. The most recent example is the Soviet Union. Beneath its military might was a terminally ill economy. The USSR spent up to 20% of its GDP on its military, an example of military overextension taken to its absolute extreme. Central planning killed innovation, and by the 1980s, the nation couldn't even feed itself. When oil prices collapsed in the 1980s, the system crumbled. On December 26, 1991, the Soviet Union simply ceased to exist. Not from war, but from internal economic implosion. The pattern had played out perfectly once again, and now we look in the mirror. The United States is following the exact same path. Stage 1, military overextension, is evident in over 750 military bases worldwide and a budget larger than the next 10 countries combined. Stage 2, currency debasement, is also clear. Since 1971, the dollar has lost 98% of its purchasing power. The mechanism is different, a printing press instead of copper, but the result is the same. The third stage, the debt spiral, is in full swing. The U.S. national debt is over $36 trillion, and the country now borrows money just to pay the interest on prior debt. The fourth stage, the loss of production, is seen in how America no longer makes things on the scale it used to. It designs and consumes them, becoming dependent on imports. And the fifth stage, social decay, is reflected in record-low trust in institutions and a deep political division that has paralyzed the nation. 5 stages are complete. 5 familiar steps that led 3 empires to their demise. And now, knowing this code, you can ask yourself the 2 decisive questions. First, what happens when the rest of the world, seeing the monumental debt, begins to lose faith in the empire's money? That is stage 6. And second, what happens when that empire, stripped of its superpower, can no longer pay its bills? That is stage 7. History doesn't provide exact dates, but it shows the inevitable endgame. Every fallen empire believed it was exceptional. Perhaps this time is different. But the pattern is relentless. The math is unforgiving. The past doesn't predict the future, but it does provide the blueprint. Subscribe, and we'll learn how to read it so you can build your own path.